She was sitting there holding it, shaking it, like a sauce. How great this is gonna be.
Yeah.
I'm checking.
Can't tell them no.
How are you doing?
How are you?
Hi, Devin. Good, how are you?
Great.
How's it going?
Fine, how are you?
She looked like he might
One
have
never
been
knows.
Yeah. She makes me do her classes. It kicks
Kick mine.
I know, right? It's harder and harder. We're good.
She does. It's cold.
It's good.
Yeah.
Back to no sleep.
That's usually how it happens.
Figuring that out. It's good. Yeah.
talking about it.
They can see you too.
It's like, well, I shouldn't have
Oh, so
done
you
it.
do it at home?
So we do it at home.
That'd be cool though.
I look like an idiot.
So you can get the culture yourself.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't mind doing it at home. Nobody thinks about it's uncoordinated.
Well, no. I got
You're right there
you.
with me? Okay, we'll stand in the back row, we're up to go somewhere. I don't want nobody to see her.
Better do it with somebody. She's
Absolutely.
like an idiot.
Everybody's falling through the sea out here.
Tabs is what it's called.
You can't keep a secret. What's going on out there? I need to sell.
Yeah.
They didn't come.
There's no
Zoning
sewer.
it.
There's no sewer.
Get
down
one.
there, so I don't have to worry.
How's that the fishing?
What their time?
She's obsessed.
That's your warning.
You guys, we're live now.
Oh, we are.
That's your warning, yeah.
Oh, she's a character. Okay.
You're off. Yeah. Good point.
She is trying to figure that out. Like, I think her plan is to go back, but.
Are you ready, Mike?
Yeah, ready
Are you
here.
ready to talk
Thanks.
online?
Yeah, I think it's just us here in the room online, so.
Okay.
Nobody else.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the DeSoto City Planning and Zoning. Roll call.
Manson,
Present.
Templin,
Here.
Wayne,
Here.
Milborn,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
all are present.
Okay, under general business. Approval of Planning Commission agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the planning commission agenda.
One second.
You have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item B, approves minutes of the Planning Commission meeting held on March the 22nd, 2020.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on March 22nd, 2020.
I second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item C, disclosure of conflict of interest. Do we have any of that tonight? Seeing none. Item D, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. Do we have any? Seeing none. Item 4, call to the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so at this time. Any presentation is for information purposes only. No action will be taken. There is a 4-minute time limit. Do we have anybody?
I have questions about the zoning. Is this the time that I would ask those?
Nope.
Okay.
Seeing none, we close the public hearing, or public comments. Item 5, public hearing. We're going to continue this on to next month due to some, I guess, paperwork hangups between the two parties.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to briefly update you. The Jakes and Taco Bell over the course of the month have not been able to get an agreement for the location of the sign. In fact, just before I came in here, I got some emails sign company representative, sort of close, but when they wanted to actually say, can we address the planning commission tonight? And it's, no, we'll just move on till the 24th of May and take care of it. So we would need a motion to continue the public hearing until May 24th.
I'll make a motion that we continue the public hearing until May the 24th.
We have a motion,
Second.
second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Schultz,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Manson,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
motion carries.
Item 7, new business. Consider final plat for the Flint development at 103rd and Edgerton Road. Brad?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a culmination of a lot of time and effort between city staff and the applicant on getting the preliminary plat to the point where the city staff is comfortable presenting it to the planning commission. After all these discussions and meetings, at this point, staff is comfortable recommending approval to the planning commission. I do have included in the staff report several conditions that still need to be met. I'll run through the staff report for you and then stand for any questions you have. The applicant is here tonight, and then also Mike is going to talk a little bit about the development agreement approved by the city council on April 7th. And we will choose, you could address the public if you like, but this is not a public hearing, so it is the planning commission's meeting to ask the questions and discuss this project with yourselves. So the preliminary plat was submitted. We did have a sketch plat meeting on April 1st to review the development, and after that, I did issue a determination that the proposed development was a major subdivision and those requirements for the preliminary plat will be needed to be met. Moving forward, the development agreement has been approved by the city council and is in your, at least the overview that Patrick prepared is in your packet. Mike will get into that in a little bit. The preliminary plat is 3 lots. There's a large 182-acre lot, a mid-sized lot of nearly 99 acres, then a smaller lot of 9 acres that is on the west side of the project. The submittal was quite large, so there's a link to, you could go look at the drainage report and all the drawings that were in the packet to zoom in on those to your, as much detail as you'd like to look at it. And even so, it was still nearly 30 megs of what I sent out, so there's a lot of information for you to review. But the overall concept has not changed for several months. I mean, there's 6 big box distribution buildings, 2 detention streamway corridors. There's a proposed network that extends from 95th Street and then sort of curls straight down to Lexington. There's also more of a horseshoe-shaped road that goes around Building E. Right now, they're all proposed to be privately held roads. There is still some discussion on whether or not these would ultimately be turned over to the city to maintain. City staff's opinion is the 2 roads I just described should be turned over to the city to be maintained, and that's why in the staff report, conditional approval should have those roads at least as a minimum built to city standards. The other roads certainly could be within tracks.
Somebody's online.
I think we have a late guest.
So those, that's an item that's still under discussion to some degree, but really as far as affecting the preliminary plat, I mean, the plat is lots and blocks and tracks, and it is preliminary in nature. It's not final. There will be a point where the applicant will need to submit a final plat, which the planning commission will approve. That will go to the city council to accept easements and rights of ways. So there is a property transaction, so that's what city council is involved in that. And at that point, there really won't be any discussion on public-private roads. Those decisions will be made So at this point, the layout is that the roads are privately held at this point. And our recommendation is that at least the two that I mentioned will be built to city standards, because we believe that at some point they should be turned over to the city so to maintain and take care of.
Brad, I'm sorry, I understand the horseshoe.
Yeah.
Where's the other one?
Okay, it's the one that, yeah, if you look at the screen up there, Roger, it's 95th Street Strand, see where Mike's got the cursor?
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of the one that goes primarily north and south, all the way
Okay.
down.
Okay, thank you.
So it goes around the three buildings that are along, between the three buildings and one building on Edgerton Road.
Thank you.
So I did put in our section on preliminary plats, and I highlighted some of the more salient points that are important for the planning commission to know. That it is, once again, preliminary in nature. This term that comes up a lot is general arrangement of lots and approximate size. General plan of sewage disposal, water supply, drainage, general street layout and adjacent property. So these are a lot of things that we spent a lot of time, and I think we've gone a lot farther than just general layout of these items. We've got into some pipe sizings now. We did submit a drainage report. The traffic report was submitted on this weekend. We did have a meeting Friday afternoon with the applicant, so we did go through the traffic study, but because of its nature, after the packets were turned out or submitted to the planning commission, a recommendation to have those conditions in the staff report and potential approval by the planning commission to remain in the discussion tonight. The water study by Water 7 has not been completed. And so we're not sure if they'll be able to serve that site. I feel pretty confident they will, but the city of DeSoto can't serve that site. Water towers nearby, so we have added capabilities. And Mike does know that. There is a process where those water rights can be transferred to the city of DeSoto should Water 7 not be able to serve the location. The applicant did turn in the grading plan. Actually, that's been on the books it's been submitted for quite some time. I really want to get through the preliminary plat process with the planning commission before we issue the grading permit. And once again, the grading permit is not tied to preliminary plat, so we could have issued it 45 days ago when they submitted it, but I thought it was better that the planning commission had an opportunity to go through the preliminary plat, ask questions about grading and drainage before we went ahead and issued the grading permit for this project. Landscaping plans, and then once again, for preliminary plats, it's just a buffering plan, it's just the exterior. And so that has been submitted as well, and also the drainage has been submitted. One thing that's important, I was talking to the chairman just a little before the meeting, go to page 404, which is right above our recommendations. Standards for approval of the preliminary plat. Preliminary plat, having proposed subdivision shall be approved by the planning commission unless the applicant provides clear and convincing evidence that, and then there's 4 items. And as I went through the checklist as well, and then additionally our technical review that's also included in your staff report, all those checklist items were sufficient, but as I thought about, did they make these provisions? Did they provide clear and convincing evidence that they've met the conditions of the city of DeSoto for approval of the preliminary plat? And that's where I based my recommendation to the planning commission to approve the preliminary plat is presented with the conditions that are 1 through 5 that are below. One thing also I wanted to point out is the preliminary plat effective date is 12 months, and if nothing happens within 12 months, then the preliminary plat process needs to start over. So it would start ticking tonight that I need to make some headway on this project with the final plat, site plan, and then additional building permits, etc. So with that, I will stand for any questions. And Mike, if you want to run through
Yeah, sure, I'll address it just briefly. The reason, so included in your packet was the development agreement that was actually approved by the city council at their last council meeting. And the reason it's included in your packet is because it directly addresses some of the things that a planning commission should review when looking at a preliminary plat, even at a preliminary level. Most related to your consideration is the utilities, infrastructure, and the road network. So the development agreement lays out provisions for the annexation, the rezoning of the property, which has already taken place. It also lays out provisions for an economic incentive tax abatement of 85% for industrial uses at the property. There's mechanisms for issuance of industrial revenue bonds, which will allow the construction materials on the property not to be assessed a sales tax. So those things are background and good for information for you to know. But most pertinently are the provisions about the road improvements and the utilities. So in that development agreement, there is a commitment from Flint Development to reconstruct Edgerton Road from K10 down to 103rd Street to a minor arterial standard. So that's a 3-lane section, curb and gutters, storm sewers, sidewalk on at least one side with appropriate lighting and a bike lane. There's also provision to provide intersection improvements at 103rd and Edgerton Road and also 103rd and Evening Star in that development agreement. There's also a provision to extend sanitary sewer service to the site. The development agreement stipulates that the city will undertake those improvements, issue bonds for those, and perform those upgrades necessary to get sanitary sewer service, which involves a pump station near K10 and Edgerton Road that would pump the flows down to a utility corridor along Sunflower Road that then goes to the treatment plant. The city performs that, and in exchange for that, there's an agreement that the developer or the development will use a certain amount of sewer service sufficient to pay off the debt service for those improvements. So those things are lined out in that development agreement. If you have any questions about that, and Patrick's here too to maybe address some more of the nuanced items in there if you're curious about those. But we wanted to provide it to you because it does address those areas specifically that a planning commission should look at with a preliminary plat. So that was really all we intended to do there.
Brad, do you have anything else?
No, I sure don't, Mr. Chairman.
How about the rest of us? Do you have any concerns?
Because I can't ever keep my mouth shut, I'll ask a few questions. Got a couple of different things that occurred to me when I read this. One is, since we just talked about the development agreement, so can you maybe explain to me how the benefit district works?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because it looks like we're kind of hanging our hat on a benefit district to help pay for some of this.
Yeah, so the intent of the benefit district is for the construction of Edgerton Road. And the intent of that is that the developer intends to fully fund the benefit district with their own capital funds. So it will be paid for. But their concern was that somebody adjacent to that road or next to or in the area could have a competitive advantage if they were able to use that road to conduct their own industrial development and put them at a competitive advantage. So the intent of the benefit district is to capture a future scenario where a development wants to occur that attaches to the road. That development has to pay their fair share of the cost of constructing that road. In that event, development across the road comes in, 200 acres industrial. They have to pay an upfront cost proportionate to what their share would have been had the benefit district been in place the entire time. So sometimes you call those pioneering fees or curb cut fees or something of that nature, but that's the intent. And the benefit district is formed as a mechanism to allow that future event. In that event in the future, that potential development would have to pay into the benefit district, and that payment would largely go back to the developer.
So what's the extent of the improvement that's necessary that brings somebody into the benefit?
It is essentially a substantial improvement to a new road connection or a substantial improvement to an existing road connection.
It's all tied to the road connection?
Yeah, it's tied, it's statutorily has to be tied to a physical connection to, Patrick, correct me, physical connection to the road. So if someone wants to connect to that road and they're in the city, and they make a substantial improvement or a new drive or a new public road, then that triggers their inclusion. That triggers that benefit fee is the way it's called in the development.
So the substantial improvement, though, is to a connection to the road.
Yes.
Specifically Edgerton Road, correct?
Yeah, specifically Edgerton Road, right.
How many connections are they showing on that plan? Is it 1, 2, 3? Is that what this plan shows?
Well, the scenario I'm talking would address a connection on the other side of the street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if one of those people that live over there now, if they wanted to pave their driveway, that would, since they're not in the city, that wouldn't do it?
Yeah, so those are the two conditions. They have to be in the city, and then they'd have to make a substantial improvement. So the statutory language about a substantial improvement might be interpreted to mean, yes, if they just pave a gravel driveway, they just pave it, that could be interpreted to mean, yeah, you meet that trigger. But they would have to be in the city first for that to occur. And in that event, the city would have to initiate that benefit fee being collected. The developer has indicated that is not at all their intent. Their intent is not that, if somebody wants to pave their driveway, that's fine. Their intent is they don't want to be at a competitive disadvantage to somebody across the street. So, but technically, yes, just paving a driveway may trigger that if they're in the city at the time.
So as a related question, the benefit fee area depiction, Exhibit C1.
Yeah.
Is that just, what am I looking at in relation to the development?
Yep, let me see if I can get there quickly. Essentially, what you're looking at is the Flint development, the 370 acres of the Flint development property is essentially being assessed at an appropriate rate. Essentially, would be assessed about half of the benefit, the total cost of the road improvement. The rest of this, so this shaded region, is this what you're talking about?
Yeah. Where's
This-
that in relation to the Flint development?
So the Flint development is here.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is 95th Street, this is Edgerton Road, and this is 103rd. So it's from Edgerton Road east, is that half a mile or a quarter mile? I think it's a quarter mile, yeah. So that's the benefit fee area as it's described in the agreement. Is that right? Yeah.
So if any of those lots sell and they get split, they could be subject to that fee. Could be.
If it's an improvement that touches the road,
Right,
And they're in the city.
and they're in the city.
yeah.
Most of that's not.
Is that right? Most of that area is not annexed?
Yeah, none of it is. I don't believe any of this is in the city right now.
Okay.
And the annexation has to be voluntary.
Yeah. Yep.
So then those properties up there on 95th, so anything that ties into that 95th, that still counts.
Well, I'm not sure about this property here, may not, but 95th, no, this wouldn't count. If this property connects to 95th, doesn't count. If this property down here connects to 103rd, doesn't count.
Because they're not annexed.
Well, because they're not annexed, and they would not be connecting to the improvement.
Edgerton's the only one.
Yeah,
So I guess the Flint team, they're worried about somebody buying all that property and connecting. it.
yeah, for instance, buying this whole quarter section or whatever, and, yeah. Yeah,
So then what if they buy it and connect to 103rd?
it might be a loophole.
Justin.
Sorry, I'm just-
Patrick, are you following that hypothetical?
But we're not doing a whole lot to improve 103rd through this, at this.
No, not with this,
Oh.
certainly not here. No. This intersection is,
I guess I'm just concerned about the existing residences out there, that they're not gonna be drug in some out of this.
well, again, it's a good discussion to have, but not exactly, the preliminary plat it's tough to address that
Oh,
concern
okay.
in the context of a preliminary plat discussion. But the council had similar concerns.
Okay.
They did, and do. It's just we, statutorily, there's very strict requirements, what you have to include, what doesn't have to be included. And, yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't narrow it down any more than we've got it kind of there articulated in that development agreement.
So my next line of questions was that I did click on the connection that was to the 30 megs, the whatever all of the additional stuff was, and I kind of looked at what's going to happen to water here, but it wasn't real clear to me in terms of stormwater and how that's going to run. I mean, this, obviously, it's a huge development to begin with, but it looks like it's a whole lot of pavement and a whole lot of building. And I didn't have a chance really to look at those to kind of think about that. I understand you've looked at it and you think it's okay, but it'd be helpful if you gave some comment to it.
William, did you want to address, you did all the drainage study and modeling, so you are the expert on that. As you can see, there's several detention ponds and two real drainage corridors that you take advantage of to take care of the stormwater issues.
Yes, my name is William Bob. I'm a licensed registered engineer in the state of Kansas, and I work on the drainage report for this. There's a number of regional detention basins. Maybe I can kind of show you. There's here, and there's another one right here. And these.
William, it might be better. Let me give you a laser pointer here. It'll show up on this screen.
Oh, okay.
It won't show up on the TV.
Oh, okay.
Fun button? Oh, no, don't push that button.
Is it,
It's just the orange little flash. Yeah. Let me get the right screen back up.
Got a little technology.
I know.
Oh, here we go. This is good. Okay, is this a,
Yeah, that's a
Good
good
one.
one. That kind of shows you the general location. There's one basin there, there's another basin there, one here, and then two there. And you're right, there's a lot of pavement, a lot of buildings, but these detention basins will store the additional runoff and meter it out and release it. So that we're actually discharging less than existing conditions. The city's stormwater regulations has a prescriptive so much allowable release rate, CFS per acre. So, and we've definitely met all that. So each development as it comes in, they've got some of those detention basins that are available for their use.
So generally, does the site go, I think it goes generally to the west, doesn't it? Is that how it's gonna drain?
To the northwest, there's this drainage way that kind of comes through there. There's actually 3 separate watersheds. There's a culvert under here, under the highway, one here, and then one here. So we've kind of got 3 separate watersheds that we looked at, and we're very careful not to exceed the capacity of any one of those. In fact, the discharges that go to those culverts will be less than what's going there right now.
So essentially, those basins are set up if the northeast building goes first, then you can just do that first basin, and then everything will operate fine.
Yes, the detention basins will be built with part of the grading, because they're also part of the sediment and erosion control. So we kind of doubled up on the uses of them. So they'll be going in long before any pavement does.
So all that will drain to the west, so there's really no need to worry about it going into the Kill Creek watershed.
That is correct.
Okay.
So I do think at that previous meeting, there was a resident that was concerned about drainage, so essentially anything parking lot wise on the east side, that all goes, west, is that?
Yes, that is entirely correct. In fact, there's a number of culverts under Edgerton now that drains eastward, because on the west side of Edgerton, there is existing. Some areas that go that way, but once we get the grading done, all that will be eliminated. So we're actually gonna see less runoff to the east as well.
Where's all the roadway drainage go?
That will be, as they design the road, I haven't been involved in that. But my understanding is that they would drain to the low spots that exist there now, and we utilize those. I don't think they're changing the vertical profile of the road that much. So, they're gonna put their curb gutter in, it's gonna have, storm sewers, curb inlets, and then it'll drain to the, appropriate locations where it's draining now.
I was kind of looking at those grades on that northeast building. Looks like it's a 3-to-1 slope coming up from Edgerton Road, going to the west. Is there gonna be enough room for berms and landscaping, between the, trailer parking and that slope?
Yes, there will be. The slopes don't exceed 3-to-1, anywhere, and yeah, we've got, I think I know one of the bits of information that we submitted there was a landscape plan and kind of layout showing the buffer zones and so forth. I think that was in the packet that was submitted.
I know a lot of the comments, a lot of the discussion was on buffering and having the berms and landscaping.
Yeah, now, something else to keep in mind too is whoever comes in and develops this, they're gonna have their own landscaping requirements they're gonna have to meet as they submit their development plans. So what we show is not by any means the totality of the landscaping.
Do you have any questions? Roger, got any more?
Those were the burning ones. I'm good.
So you're satisfied with them?
Thank you for your answer. Appreciate it.
Jim?
I'm good.
I think my only concern is that we're designing this, but we have no idea what we're tying into. Obviously, and that's what he's addressing, is there is a plan for this, but basically we're saying we're doing all of this, but we don't really have any idea what we're connecting to. It doesn't matter. We're designing all of this to fit a spot, and then there's really nothing there. And we're seeing nothing. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter to us to design, but.
Can you address that, Brad?
Utilities, yeah. I mean, we're doing all this, and we think we're gonna do this and that, but we don't really know. We don't even know if we have adequate water for the site. So, I mean, it's kinda like we're.
Well, then also the
Going
sewer, I
crazy.
mean, has the city started that process yet?
Yeah, well, we have, and we'll talk with the developer more about that. Yeah, so in terms of sewer, what we're tying into, the development agreement does have this figure here that does show the alignment and route and the general plan for what those sewer improvements will entail. There's a similar one for water. In the event that the city serves the water, this would be the plan for the water improvement. And it's nothing magic, it's just extending lines along the existing corridors. The sewer is a little more involved. So the Flint site is here in the light blue. There would be a regional pump station installed somewhere in this area, just north of K10 along Edgerton Road. And from that, a gravity sewer main would essentially be constructed all the way up Edgerton down to 103rd Street. The pump station would pump eastward along the north right-of-way line of K10 to this utility corridor along Sunflower Road. That's the Army corridor, that big wide one. And then there would be a sewer constructed from that point northward This corridor runs within a couple hundred feet of the sewer plant down here, so that's the general plan. Yeah, it's not shown on the preliminary
Right.
plat, but it's in that development agreement document.
Right. And that's what you addressed. Like you
Yeah,
said,
that's-
those are things we should be
That's why we-
looking at, is kind of all of
That's
that
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
But none of that stuff exists. So we're just thinking that it's all good.
Yeah, so when would they need those services?
We've committed to having this completed by the end of 2023.
Because like operational.
Why wouldn't the city try to get the rights for the water?
It's complicated. It has to do with the service territory boundary for Rural Water 7.
Right.
There's a whole book of statute on protection of rural water service territories, and there's a statutory procedure to go through when you're in this position, where it's in the district's, the rural water district service territory. We can't just go and unilaterally say, we're putting a pipe out there and provide service. That would be against statute. So what we're doing now is the developer is working with the rural water district to say, hey, I've got this project coming. Can you provide me service? The rural district is deciding whether or not they can and deciding how much that might cost and doing these timelines that we've all done on the sewer. In the event that they cannot provide provide the water in adequate capacity or time frame for the developer, there's a statutory process where we can initiate an annexation essentially of the water service territory. So that's what we've agreed to do in the development agreement. So it's complicated, but I guess in a way it's good news because there's two providers that are likely able to provide service there rather than just one.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, can you guys speak a little bit on that traffic study? You have enough information just to talk about it, or is that something that?
Yeah, no, not really. A couple things on the traffic study. A traffic study is not required at this phase of development, so that's one thing. It's been provided because we wanted to address anything that KDOT might have a comment on with connection up to the interchange area like that. But we just got that this week and have not had a chance to review it. I would just, it's concluded that the roadway section that's proposed for Edgerton Road is more than adequate to provide this plus other industrial uses in the area. Did not conclude any need for any interchange improvements at K10 at Edgerton or at the other interchange by Evening Star. But again, that's going to be submitted to KDOT for review, and we haven't reviewed it.
So when would we see that again? Or would that be
It
on the-
is a requirement at the time of site plan.
Okay.
So that's kind of the chicken or the egg sort of thing, because we're going to get a site plan number 1 in here for a building that might be 500,000 square feet, or it might be 50,000 square feet. So we want to do it holistically, and the developer does too. So it's at that first site plan that we'll be digging into that.
And I think comment Todd about that first building really is the one that's gonna trigger a lot of what happens out there. Right now, this is the applicant's best estimate on what they would like to see, maximize the site, but the first tenant or contract for providing a distribution building will probably be a different size. And how do you make a change for something, require them to hold them to a preliminary plat that probably at some point will change. I know there's a little bit of discomfort, not knowing exactly what that first building is gonna be, but nobody knows what it's gonna be. So that's why we've got this process that we're going through, preliminary plat. They would have to submit a revision and then also a final plat, because as I mentioned in the staff report, that's when property gets filed with the county, so there'll have to be roads dedicated and all those types of things, easements shown. So this is just a multi-step process. You don't have all the answers ready until as we get closer to the finish, which would also include a site plan as mentioned.
Mike, I have a question on the sewer improvements. Would the homeowners along there be required to hook up to a sewer there, or could they have the option of hooking up to a sewer?
Certainly no requirement. No requirement. Don't know about option, I would imagine they would, but I don't know if I can speak to that directly.
I just
There's certainly
wondered.
no requirement for that.
If they were to tie into the sewer, does that put them in the benefit district in some way or sort?
No, I think the road benefit district is specific to the road improvements.
So you're not intending to do a benefit district for the sewer?
No, no.
Yeah, I do think if they annex in, I think we have a code provision that would require.
Oh, if they're within
that
a
they can
certain.
act- If they're within a certain distance, I think, but if they're outside the city, obviously they wouldn't.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Roger?
Well, I was just, discussion is more than a question, but certainly can make the point. So we're asked to provide approval of a preliminary plat, and as Brad's pointed out here under page 404, section H, that the applicant proves by clear and convincing evidence that these 4 items have been covered. 2 of the items, the water service study and the traffic impact study, we're asked to just make that contingent as a contingency for approval. But are we doing our job if we just say, yeah, it's contingent upon that, or do we need to see those?
Well, I guess as far as the water, we've got the city of DeSoto has the ability to serve the site. What Water 7 is struggling with is do they have the capacity to serve this location? And as Mike pointed out, there's a lot of statute and
Right.
battles have gone between cities and water districts about who gets to serve territory, so.
But we can make a determination that there is adequate public facilities when it comes to water, we just don't know who's gonna provide it.
That's correct.
Okay, well, is the same true with traffic though? Because item 4 says they've taken every effort to mitigate the impact of proposed subdivision on public health, safety, and welfare. We don't know anything about it.
Well, we do have a traffic impact study, and in the preliminary plat and all the multitude of sheets, there is a cross-section in there that does show the improvements that the traffic impact study was based upon. Now, as Mike pointed out, we've not had time to go through all that, but those are things that we still.
Well, it's not a required submittal. The traffic impact
Yeah,
study is not a required submittal on a preliminary plat, so I don't know how we could be expected to make that determination from a traffic impact. from a specific-
What do I use to make a determination that they proved by clear and convincing evidence that they've made every effort to mitigate the impact of the proposed subdivision upon health, safety, and welfare? What are we hanging our hat on?
Well, that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of areas of, beyond traffic.
I would agree.
Okay.
But that's an example of one thing we don't have. We're making that a contingency. I just want to make sure that we're doing our job.
Would that show up on the final site plan? The
Well,
traffic study?
certainly traffic impact study is required for a site plan submittal.
Right.
So I guess the main thing that I'm really a little concerned about is the difference between private versus public. I mean, I'd like to kind of have somebody make a decision that, hey, these are gonna be public. And we just say that and move forward with that instead of kind of being the quasi-private versus public. We don't know yet until what's gonna push the ball over the hill on making that decision.
Well, right now, the proposal is they're private streets, and that can be revised. I guess something else you need to think about is we've gone through this process several times with different developments. Don Barnes, Harper Ridge, had a revised his preliminary plat based on some changes in streets and requirements. I mentioned the carriage houses before. They've gone through like 6 revisions on their development plan and final plats. I guess Chair Stokes' Nate Hardy also has changed his preliminary plat based on wanting to change and revise lot sizes. So, and granted, this is 400 acres with this water distribution building. But this process does happen and has happened fairly often in DeSoto. So it's really nothing new, but it's this type of intensity and size of structures is in Minnesota. So the process we're following is what we've done in the past for development. As Mike said, the traffic impact study, maybe that's something that you could require. We have to go through the text amendment process to include that into our preliminary plat process, but right now it's not required. So, but I can tell you, all the meetings that we've had, with the sketch plat meeting, the meetings we had prior to that, we did talk about traffic quite a bit. That's sort of my feeling that the applicant has made those concerted efforts to mitigate traffic and make sure, and they don't want traffic jams or problems or issues with turn lanes and any of those types of things either, so.
I think what's important to keep in mind on the private or public street issue is with the preliminary plat, and largely our preliminary plat regulations, it fits more into the single-family residential subdivision scenario than it does the industrial scenario like this. But one of the things you have to look at are these lots that are shown, are they conforming to the zoning districts that they're in? Are they wide enough? Are they deep enough? Do they have setbacks? Are they buildable, right? And this issue comes up on this plat because if you look at buildings D and F, they're landlocked unless you assume that some of these roads are going to be public, or you assume that building D is going to be under common ownership with buildings A or B. So I think it's reasonable to assume that these are all going to be, or they might all be separate ownership. And so for that reason, that's our recommendation, is that the preliminary plat shows by a revision to the preliminary plat that can be approved by staff having a look at it next week, if the planning commission approves it with the condition, that these loop roads that we described are public roads and show up as public rights-of-way on this plan here. So I'm just going to sketch them on here so that we're all, I think we can kind of understand where they're going. But I downloaded this thing so I could sketch on it. Okay, that didn't work. I'll get there. Here we go. So it's this, 95th Street, and then it comes. Gotta make that thicker. So it's that one in red, and then this one.
You're really good.
I was thinking, yeah, you got a
I know,
steady
look at
hand
that.
around that corner.
There. Those two, I mean, is that correct, Brad?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Those are the two that we talked
So this
about.
means building D would have access to a public street, as would F.
Would there be any need for the ones between A and B and C?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think so. I mean, not to make those lots conforming to the zoning regs.
So how would a truck from building D get out to the highway?
D?
Yeah.
It would come on this red line down here to 103rd Street and out to Evening Star, or could come up to 95th.
Are we worried about truck traffic on 103rd?
No, not worried.
I don't know, I can't recall what's designed as, how it's built out there.
Yeah, well, it was K10 before,
it's-
so the pavement section is pretty stout. And it's a rural section road. It's 12-foot lanes with some shoulders, and good sight lines there. So it's,
I think the bigger concern would be 95th Street.
Yeah, 95th there obviously wasn't K-10.
But you're running
right.
the
Well,
same thing that
this will be reconstructed.
Okay,
Yeah, 95th.
that's part of the reconstruction.
And same thing happened at the intermodal down at Gardner. There's a gas station on the corner on Gardner Road and 35, and there's a 2-lane road like 95th that ran to the west.
Oh yeah.
And nothing ever got done to it, and it was just like a country road.
Yeah.
Trucks just all day up and down the road. Do the same thing when we run down to the gas station. It's easier just to run right down. That would be how do you enforce that? Put up a no truck sign?
Oh, you mean continuing east here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could, well, that's in the county, but I could restrict
So
trucks there.
who maintains Edgerton Road? Is that a city road or is that a county?
It's city now, yeah, we annexed to the east right away line, so it's city. As of January.
Well, again, I'm still looking for some help on how to make a determination that subdividers made every effort to mitigate the impact of the proposed subdivision on public health, safety, and welfare without seeing how traffic's gonna work, but that's me.
Should we add a condition that we need to see the traffic study with the site plan?
Well, I do have in there, I did mention in the staff report that a site plan will be submitted. I guess it was sort of because our regs require a site plan, according to traffic study, site plan. But I guess you could add that provision in the motion itself. But for me, it was just, well, since it's already required in the site plan, I'd like to add that.
Well, you're asking us to make these 4 findings, right?
Yes.
I've raised a question that I'm uncomfortable with doing that without knowing what's gonna happen with traffic out there. But that's just my opinion, and I'd be happy to listen to anybody's argument on the other side of that.
Well, Commissioner, are you considering that they're contractually obligated to make these road improvements? I mean, I think that's similar to if, you know, if they were coming to the city and we get a development agreement that they, I mean, I feel like that's definitely within your discretion to.
How many trips per day are gonna go down Edgerton Road? Do we have that number?
I have no idea.
How many trucks? What's the truck traffic impact gonna be on the related roads? I mean, that's what a traffic study does, I think, is talks about how it's gonna impact the neighboring areas. And I'm just saying, if we're asked to make this finding, I don't know how we do that without a traffic study.
Well, I guess from my perspective, one, as I've said, we've talked about all these items with the developer. We do have a traffic study that has been submitted. Mike and I haven't had the time to really go through it. We did have a preliminary meeting. But it also comes back to the point is we don't require a traffic impact study for a preliminary plat. So can the planning commission make a decision on something that's not required in our city code? So, but as Patrick said, they are contractually required to build this road. They have submitted a traffic study. We've had numerous discussions about this road. To your point about how many trucks do they think they're gonna generate, I've not looked at that in detail enough to tell you that answer. But my confidence is that they've met that requirement. That's what I said, that's why I recommend approval.
So when the final plat comes in, that's when we're gonna see the traffic study. And if we didn't like it, we could deny it then, am I correct?
Well, the site plan will have the traffic study.
Right.
So, and that is part of your jurisdiction, so to speak, as planning commission. If that traffic study is not met adequately for the development in front of you, that is a grounds for denial.
It would have been helpful if we could have seen it tonight. It would have made us all more comfortable, I think, but.
My problem, I guess, is just with the generality of the language. I mean, making this finding is hard to do without, if you're saying it's not required, okay, great, but it's gonna have an impact on everybody out there when you have trucks rolling up and down the road, and we don't have anything to make a determination on.
And so whatever the traffic study says, if it says it needs improvements at Edgerton and 103rd, say 95th and 103rd, I mean, they're gonna have to make those improvements anyway, so. The developer
They
will.
have to make those improvements.
I mean, regardless, I guess if we see it tonight or at the site plan approved, that'd be accurate.
Yes, the Edgerton Road gets built all at once, so it's not just piecemeal as the north piece comes in. It is a entire construction project from K-10 to 103rd Street.
I guess in terms of the generality of the language and you know, the determination that all the health and safety and welfare has been taken care, and knowing that traffic impact study is not required at this time, you might look at it, one way to look at it is that, do you think 370 acres, 4 million square feet of industrial development on this site with two direct interchanges onto the Kansas Highway 10 and a commitment to reconstruct Edgerton Road all the way and a commitment to reconstruct these two intersections, is that a reasonable enough assurance for you to make that?
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think that's a good way to put it.
Well, on a traffic study, I don't know what good it's gonna do, because Sunflower, where are those trucks gonna go? When they leave Sunflower, they're gonna go down Edgerton Road, so your traffic study would have to be Sunflower as well, I would think, so,
And a lot of the traffic study is gonna depend on what.
yeah, what's going
actually
in,
those buildings.
yeah. So I
Agree with that. I'm disturbed by us having to make this finding.
right, I agree.
It's like, well, especially since the clear and convincing is the language that's used for the standard of the evidence. But I guess Mike's point is that we have an assurance from the developer, and we've got the development agreement that says they will make those improvements necessary in order to make it work. Maybe that's enough to hang our hat on.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Mike or Brad? Seeing none, I'd call for a motion.
So I guess it might be one more discussion. Are we gonna include the roads in red to make public? Is that what we're gonna include that? And Mike Drew?
Nobody ever said, do you want that outlined in red in here?
Well, that's the I think that will be the staff recommendation, that be part of the other requirements now. That's
It
of course
actually
up to your
doesn't say,
discretion.
it just says internal roads need to be built to city standards, not actually.
A further clarification on that being these roads in red.
Okay.
Or should be designated as public.
Public, which, that's not what this says.
Now, the applicants here in the audience tonight, I think it might be the first they're hearing it. At your discretion, Mr. Chair, you might give them an opportunity to weigh in on that condition, because they have not seen that one.
Would you like to come up and say a few words about this?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Good discussion. We obviously know this is a huge development and a big issue. I think our point would be at the end of the day is this is but one more step on a many step journey we have between us all, right? We still have to do site plans, this is one preliminary plat. I highly suspect we'll be back with more preliminary plats as users come forward. We have to do final plats. This is not kind of like the last bite at the apple. We will be here again and again and again until you're basically sick of seeing us over the next probably, 5 years to a decade together of working through all those items. To that specific point about making those public roads, we would vastly prefer to not do that at this point. I think the issue that Mike's identifying is a very good one, and we're torn both directions, right? We can see a lot of reasons that we would prefer a private road in this, of course, built to standards, but you've got right of way and all kinds of things that deal with that as this comes about. There's also the other side of having a public road can be a better thing for this development at the end of the day. We just don't know the answer to that at this very moment, so I don't want to make an immediate agreement to it. What I would say though is I think the staff has done a really good job between already in the recommendation of 1 and 4 in the recommendations, which we absolutely agree with, that handle both of these issues. As one, any roads need to be built to public standards. And two, the second one of having an orphan building out there, I think that's what exactly 4 is talking about, is having road easements or public access right-of-ways to be able to get to D and F so that we would never end up having some building that's landlocked, hidden in the back, can never be gotten to. We're not gonna do that as a developer. That's just one bad practice. You can't sell a building if you've got it like that. But two, I think the staff has already made a really good recommendation. So I don't know that we are against these being long-term public roads. Are we ready to make that decision here tonight on the fly? I would ask to keep these recommendations, I think, as they are, and us be able to continue to study this with staff, with the planning commission, with the council, as we move through this process over the next months and years together. With that, I'd stand obviously for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions?
Thank you
Yes,
all.
not.
We appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your service.
Thanks.
Okay. If someone will make the motion,
I'll make the motion that we recommend approval of the Flint Commerce Center preliminary plat as submitted with the conditions 1 through 5 as listed. Do I need to read those, Justin, or you've got them? You have those?
Yeah, I have them, yes.
I second it.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Schultz?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Milborn?
Yes.
Lane?
Yes.
Templin?
Yes.
Manson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks all. Great discussion. Appreciate it.
Okay. Item B, discuss planning commission training.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll introduce this topic and then turn it over to Patrick, who will kind of run me through the issues regarding our code of ethics. I think just to clarify, at what point maybe abstentions are valid and when they're not, how there's a clear line in the sand that needs to be understood by all planning commission. This is part of the ongoing training that we want to bring forward to you about how your rules work, how you interact with city council, public, and how your personal interests may intersect on issues that come before you. So, I served on the Gardner Planning Commission for 5 years. And the thing that always kind of got me
God
is
bless
when somebody's brother had a problem with something that might affect your own personal situation, but you've got no financial stake in it. People, members of the planning commission, would claim to have a conflict of interest when they really just were uncomfortable making a decision or recommendation. And I think that's something that needs to be clarified in your own mind. What's a reasonable request? And of course, as always, if you have a question about whether you might be in conflict with our code of ethics, you can always call Patrick and he'll render it. With that, I'll let Patrick run through all these items.
Thank you, commissioners, and I really didn't have, specific remarks to make to you. Wanted to make myself available for questions. I am, in the code of ethics, I'm the designated person that renders opinions as to whether there is a conflict that would be in violation of our code of ethics. Essentially, under state law, the only requirement that you have as being a member of this body is you are required to disclose substantial interest you have, which are, normally who you're employed by or property you own, that type of thing. Under state law, as long as you list those in that disclosure document that gets filed with the election office, you can vote on anything and everything. There's no restriction at all, as long as that interest is listed in that disclosure document. But the city of DeSoto, not too long after I can't remember exactly when we adopted the Code of Ethics, but it is a more stringent requirement than state law, and most cities have that. And essentially, what it says is that if you have an interest in a transaction or a vote, an official action you're taking, which would be a vote on, a preliminary plat, a site plan, then you should abstain from that. And anytime you abstain, you are required to not be part of the discussion at all. You have to completely abstain from all discussion, leave the room, and we do that at the city council level, and it's required here as well. One thing that comes up quite frequently is under our Code of Ethics, you're deemed to have an interest. For example, if a company was in front of you, for example, Flint, and your spouse worked for Flint under the Code of Ethics, assuming yourself or your wife received $5,000 or more in the current calendar year or the prior calendar year, you would have to abstain from having any action on that official action. Similar, well, sticking with that for a moment, now that would not apply in that. If you look at the code, with regard to you being disqualified because of having a monetary interest in whoever's before you, that only talks in terms of spouse. So if, for example, your brother had some connection to that company, under the Code of Ethics, you would not be precluded from voting on that action. Of course, all this is tempered by the fact that, at any time, if you feel like you have prejudged an issue, meaning you've already made up your mind before you heard what's presented at the public hearing, or there is some outside interest that you believe disallows you from, deciding something objectively, obviously you should abstain, because, what you do is premised on the fact that you are fair and impartial to the applicant. So if there's something that causes you to, you can't put that aside and give the applicant an objective consideration and vote, then you should abstain from that. And I know even some of you on this body have contacted me before a meeting and just asked the question, and that's great. I really appreciate that. I don't regularly sniff around everything to see if there's conflicts. Generally speaking, that only comes to my attention if someone raises it. And it's great when you yourselves just have a concern and you can ask me, and I'll give you an opinion on what I think on that. Maybe with regard to what Brad said, though, it would be true, the example he gave was a brother. If you had a company that was before you wanting a vote, for example, Todd, if you were in front of the planning commission to get a vote on something you were doing with your building, and your brother was on the planning commission, your brother would be precluded. He would have to abstain from that since he's related to you, and that sibling is actually in front of you asking for a vote of this body, so you would have to abstain in that regard. And the Code of Ethics does set forth how far that relationship goes. I think it's the 4th degree of
Consanguinity.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I think that goes to
Well, it's a good one,
siblings,
though. I like it.
spouses, daughters, you know, sons, so. I don't really have anything else, other than, again, just to encourage you to, you know, feel free to reach out to me, when you have any concerns. I do take it seriously that, you know, I'm put in that role to, so if I feel like you are in a conflict situation, I don't have any problem, letting you know that. But outside of that, I would just stand for any questions you have.
I'm not clear on the example you used with Todd and his brother. So if the issue there is that if Todd's brother's got an interest in something, that's not a conflict of interest, but if Todd's brother's appearing before the planning commission, that would be a problem.
Right.
So it's the person who's presenting it and who is going to be there for the decision. If you're related to that person within 4 degrees of consanguinity, which would be parents, siblings, nephews, basically.
Yeah. It really comes down to who's gonna benefit from that. So, if Todd's brother just, you know, worked for, if it was Todd's brother's company that was asking you for a vote, then clearly, yes, he's precluded. But if Todd's brother is simply doing work for an applicant before you, then no, that would not preclude him. So hopefully that answers your question.
What
Sorry, I've
about
got a
in-laws?
scratchy throat.
What about in-laws?
Those are not included in the degrees of
There we
consanguinity.
go, okay, that clarifies.
That's
Say
what the
that
test
word.
is.
You can't say that. If I can't spell it, then I'll say it. I'm just curious, because Dave does a lot of stuff, so I just.
That's a
Yeah.
good question, yeah.
Line
Yeah, no,
process.
good question.
I'll be busy playing this.
That's right.
How long is Dave gonna be your in-law?
Stay forever, Todd.
Nothing like putting him on the spot.
What
there.
kind of question is that?
I just wanted to get that on the record.
Gosh, talk about stirring the pot.
Just kidding, Todd.
It's all right, I can take it.
We love Dave. Good guy.
Got any more examples for us, Ben?
Anybody that's gonna throw her in the bus there?
Probably Roger's familiar with this case. There was an interesting case from not too long ago. I think it was in the city of Shawnee, but a planning commissioner like yourself, I don't remember all the specific facts, but essentially he came down from the dais and presented with regard to this project. It was a dental building in Shawnee. I think it did get built, but he did not disclose that he had an interest in that project, although he advocated for it, and that after, I think it was a neighbor or someone sued, and that decision got unraveled because of that, because in the court, in discussing it, took up the fact that, well, since he left the dais and came down here, was that enough to show that he separated himself? And the court said, no, that was not. He still, you know, spoke with some, you know, added credibility because he was on the body that he was advocating in front of, so.
Plus, he was a really big personality.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So let me ask this scenario. So if somebody comes with a development they want to do, and we vote on it, no involvement initially, but you become a contractor on that project at a later date, does that become a conflict of interest at a later period? No involvement initially, but the project comes to life, and you bid on the project, and you receive or awarded a contract on that project. Is that a conflict?
Yeah, you wouldn't be precluded from doing that. Because the code of ethics essentially says if you are in the same shoes as other similarly situated people, other contractors, and you get that work without any, you know, connection because of your position, then no, that would not preclude you.
But if they
you're
came
in-
back to the planning commission and needed to do something different, that would be something you'd have to disclose, you have a financial interest in the project.
Yeah.
But if you're involved in pre-development processes before approval, then you would have to abstain from that, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Just charge $4,999
There you go.
and you'll be fine. What, the 5,000 is just a random number.
It is.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Took a dart to it,
Well,
landed on that number.
because it's supposed to be substantial, so $5,000 sounds like substantial.
So do you have to disclose that you only got $4,999 if you were involved in it then?
I would recommend it.
Technically, no, you would not.
Ethically, yeah.
But we do ask if there's been communications outside the planning commission, and be kind of hard pressed to
Oh.
say no to that.
Okay.
I mean, this comes up in my practice from time to time too, that I'll have, somebody who will contact me about something that's related to a project that may very well come before the planning commission. I mean, I think I'm incumbent upon me to say, yeah, I've talked to this person before, if this is, if it impairs my ability to make a judgment on that, if I haven't been paid $5,000, I think those are the things you have to weigh when that
Yeah.
comes up.
Yeah, so much of this is kind of,
Okay,
if
Pat,
you feel uncomfortable about it, then
Yeah.
at least ask the question.
I got a good one. Developer's gonna develop land. He's trying to get annexed in the city of DeSoto, and I put my name on one of the lots, so I gotta withdraw from probably.
What do you mean?
He's gonna develop some lots. I'm gonna purchase one of those lots. And it hasn't been in front of the planning,
So when
but
when the plat comes up and you've got
I gotta just
an
excuse
interest
myself.
in one of
Yeah,
the lots, you probably are going to have to.
Yeah.
Excuse myself, yeah.
Yeah. Now, kind of a different issue that probably doesn't come up much with the plant, maybe, but legislative items, like if you're taking a vote to, impose some new regulation, if that will affect you personally, because it's legislative, different than quasi-judicial. In that respect, you're required to disclose that you have an interest, but you're allowed to go ahead and participate and vote. It's just a matter of disclosure that if it's a
Okay.
legislative thing.
But in his situation, he's not getting any financial gain from
Right.
it, right? He's just saying, I want to plan to purchase in this future
Development,
development,
yeah.
should it happen. But he
Right, and
doesn't
I'm
know.
sorry if I wasn't clear, but, financial is one thing, but if you have an interest in, so even though it's not money, he has an interest in that approval, so,
Understood.
yeah.
Is there any issue with planning commission members presenting in front of city council on a project they're involved in?
Meaning,
Well, like if I prepare a preliminary plat, I gotta abstain at planning commission, is there an issue with me speaking at city council for that project?
no, as long as you abstain from your official
Okay.
action,
Okay.
then you're good. And that's another thing with, as long as you abstain, you shouldn't, our ethics provides for that, so you shouldn't feel bad that, gosh, I've had to abstain, twice this month. We provide for that and, as long as you're compliant with that, you're good.
I will say, there was one paragraph that kind of struck me here. On page 5, paragraph F. No public officer or employee shall appear on behalf of any person or business entity other than himself, his spouse, or his children before any city, agency, board, commission, council, or municipal court. Does that mean I can't represent somebody if they get in a fist fight down at Beer 30? Municipal court? Not that I've got a big practice doing that.
you got somebody fist fights, Roger?
I guess if it was my kid, I could do it.
Yeah, we've never dealt with this section, but no, I think,
That one
you know,
struck
by
me
the
as
text of it, it
pretty
would preclude
interesting.
you. Yeah.
So my blossoming criminal practice in municipal court.
So if we get in a fight at the bar, don't call you, right?
Might be worth thinking about that,
Yeah.
because I think it does deal with the very issue you talked about. Not sure how you craft an opinion on that.
Well, it says in his capacity as such officer shall not. So he can't come in front of the city council and in his capacity as planning commission member and present on behalf of somebody.
Yeah, I don't,
There's no public officer or employee shall, in his capacity as such officer or employee, make or participate in the making of a contract. So my reading of that is.
well, that's G, I'm talking F.
Oh, shoot, sorry.
It says a member of the city council can appear before city agencies on behalf of their constituents. But that language there is not in F. The language in G is not in F. And I always thought that I could, you know, if I had a client who had some issue before the city, I could appear before them on it. I can't.
Well, what's a personal matter? Isn't that the key term there, regarding a personal matter? Is there a distinction between a personal I mean, somebody else's ticket is not your personal matter. Or
It
is
says,
it?
I think the personal matter relates to the other than. So I can't do it other than myself, my spouse, or minor children regarding personal matters.
Oh, okay, okay.
But we might think about
Yeah, let me
revisiting F a
study
little
on
bit.
that. I did when I was going through your family typo. So,
Otherwise, Justin, you were gonna have to work in another city.
No, I mean,
Well,
that's
that's a
fine.
good way to discourage people
I
from
could serve
serving.
somebody else for sure. I just have to start being on planning commission on every city.
You're gonna be busy.
yeah.
That was the only paragraph that I found
Yeah, it's a
interesting.
good catch. I still feel like the personal matter, I mean, I've already read that as,
Maybe we just need to move personal matter there.
yeah. Well, I'm glad we had the discussion about that, but yeah, let me study that. Anybody else have any other questions? Thank you, guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Patrick.
Patrick.
Mike, do you have anything else tonight?
Nothing else this evening, thanks.
Brad,
No, good, Bob.
motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
This conference is no longer being recorded.